Salutations YouTube, Lord Gaverage here with another video. I don't know what's wrong with me, I don't know why I keep uploading. Before we get into this video, I'm going to put out a little disclaimer. First time I've ever done this. I'm going to put out a little disclaimer. The things in this video are graphic and maybe upsetting to some viewers. So if you don't want to watch this, then I understand it. I'll see you in the next one. But if you're into the morbid, then please listen on. So, 25 Cromwell Street, Gloucester was an ordinary house in an ordinary terrace. The man of the house, Fred West, was cheerful and hard-working, while his wife, Rosemary, was a busy, lively mother. They were generally liked by their neighbours, although there was some gossip about the number of men who visited the house late at night, and some said that they disciplined their children too harshly. It was nothing that they felt they should tell the police or social services about. The Wests, however, had some minor legal problems during the 1970s. During the 1970s, the upper floors of the house had been divided into cheap bedsits, and Fred, who was a builder by trade, had added a single-storey extension to the rear of the property without obtaining planning permission for it. Joseph Fritzl vibes, but okay. Only he built a cellar. The story of what was actually going on behind the facade of this apparently ordinary house began to unravel during the summer of 1992. Police Constable Steve Birdside was patrolling his Gloucester beat when a group of young people came up to him and told him that children were being abused at a house in Cromwell Street, which was owned by a man named Quest. Although the young informants were unsure of the facts, it was enough to warrant further police attention, and as a result, social services eventually took five of the West children who were under 16 into care. Fred and Rose were charged with a number of sexual offences, including rape and buggery. But the case against them was dropped when two prosecution witnesses refused to testify. Fred and Rose hugged each other in the dark and then returned to their old ways as if nothing had happened. Detective Constable Hazel Savage, however, who had investigated the initial allegations, remained convinced something terrible was going on in Cromwell Street. During quiet chats with the West children, she had won their trust. They seemed particularly concerned about the disappearance of Fred and Rosemary's 16-year-old daughter, Heather, who had last been seen on 29th of May 1987. Oh, fucking hell. Her parents had not even reported her as missing, and when questioned had said that she had left home on her own accord with a lesbian in a blue Mini. But the children said that Fred would often joke about Heather being under the patio, and Savage believed that these jokes were made a little too often to simply be the product of poor taste. On 23rd of February 1994, she therefore obtained a search warrant enabling her to gain access to the property at Cromwell Street, and the following day the police started to dig up the garden. A mechanical digger was brought in to remove the topsoil. Then, in the pouring rain, an archaeological type dig began. Under the aegis of the Home Office pathologist Professor Bernard Knight, or Bernard as you Americans say because you're weird, Professor Bernard Knight, no offence, sorry, supervised by Detective Superintendent John Bennett, a team of 30 officers working in relays began sifting shovelfuls of sodden earth through a sieve in the search for clues. At night, the work continued under the glare of arc lights. On the second day, a trowel hit something hard and the loose soil was scraped away to reveal a human skull. It was thought to be Heather's, and on 25th of February 1994, Fred and Rose were arrested. Fred shouted, "I didn't kill her," as the couple were driven away in a police car. After the police had interviewed her, Rose was released without charge. By the time that her husband appeared in Gloucester Magistrates Court a few days later to be formally charged with murder, two more bodies had been found. Both were badly decomposed, having lain in the garden for 16 years. One of the bodies was identified as being that of Shirley Ann Robinson, who was a lodger at 25 Cromwell Street, who had last been seen in 1977. At the time of her death, she had been 18 years old and heavily pregnant. According to Liz Brewer, another lodger, Fred West was the father of her child, and Rose had also been pregnant with another man's child at the time, because Rose was prostituting herself to make money. A bit mad. The Wests had told Shirley that they had an open marriage, said Liz. Fred didn't seem to mind his wife expecting by another man. Where Shirley had disappeared, the Wests had informed Liz and Shirley could not cope with the growing tension between Fred and Rose and had gone to visit relatives in Germany. "I was told she probably wasn't coming back," she said. Over the next 5 days, the bodies of 2 more women were unearthed in the cellar of the house. The situation was becoming so gruesome that the police officers involved in the excavation were given stress counselling. I'm not fucking surprised. Need more than counselling. 40 more policemen were also seconded to the investigation. The police now thought that there were 5 more bodies in the house and 2 further corpses buried in a field near Fred West's former home in Muchmarkel. At 25 Cromwell Street, the floorboards were lifted, fittings were ripped out, and 200 tons of soil were excavated from the garden. In addition, the police opened up the chimney breast and broke up the bathroom floor using pneumatic drills. They furthermore discovered that the basement had been dug out to a depth of 5 feet, which I think is 1.5 meters, which had undermined the foundations of the house. Next, a 6th body, again that of a young woman, was found buried under the cellar, and it was then that the police brought in a ground-penetrating radar system. Developed during the Falklands conflict to locate plastic landmines, it was the first time that this technology had been used in a murder investigation. The device cost £2,000 a day to rent. A 7th body was located under the concrete in the cellar. The 8th was buried 4 feet, which is like 1.2 meters, I think, beneath the bath on the ground floor. Fred's brother-in-law, Graham Letts, had helped him to lay the concrete floor there in 1987. The 9th, that of the 15-year-old Carol Ann Cooper, was discovered behind a false wall in the bathroom. Carol had last been seen on 10th of November 1973. She had been in care at a children's home in Worcester at the time, but had been let out for the weekend to visit her grandmother. The police also sealed off the nearby 25 Midland Road, the West's former home. The other bodies were thought to have been buried in a cornfield known as Fingerpost Field on the road between Muchmarkel and Dimmock. I've never even heard of that place. I'm from Yorkshire, not Gloucester. They decided that up to 30 properties at which Fred had lived or worked would also have to be searched. By 11th of March 1994, Fred West had been charged with 8 murders. Throughout the investigation, he had been questioned by relays of detectives, who found him to be cooperative some of the time. From their interviews with him, they had been able to piece together the bare bones of his life story. Frederick Walter Stephen West, that's his full name, obviously, was born on 29th of September 1942 in Muchmarkel. He lived with his parents and siblings at Moor Court Cottages and developed his powerful physique while working as a farm labourer. His mother's favourite son, Daisy, was believed to have been seduced him when he was 12. His father, Walter, was a farm labourer, enjoyed incestuous relationships too. Well, things like that was fucking running the family. Must be a Gloucester thing. And regarded his daughters as sexual playthings. Fred would follow in his father's footsteps. Yeah, definitely a Gloucester thing. At the age of 19, Fred was arrested after having impregnated a 13-year-old girl. Nonce. When questioned by police, he was unabashed and openly admitted to molesting young girls, saying, "Doesn't everyone do it?" Although West escaped a charge of statutory rape when his victim refused to give evidence in court, his mother threw him out of the house and he went to live nearby with his aunt Violet. He then started work as a lorry driver, soon afterwards meeting the woman who would become his first wife, a blonde 18-year-old waitress named Catherine or Rena Costello. Pardon me. Rena was already 5 months pregnant by another man when she married Fred on 17th of November 1962. Fred gave the baby, Charmaine, his surname, and he and Rena then had a child of their own, Anne-Marie. They moved briefly to Lanarkshire and then to a caravan park in Bishop's Cleeve near Cheltenham. The marriage was already in trouble because West wanted to play sadistic sex games, which Rena hated. When she subsequently disappeared, West told friends that she had taken up with an engineer and had returned to Lanarkshire. She was never seen again. Meanwhile, West had started seeing the 15-year-old Rosemary Letts. Rosemary Pauline Letts was born 29th of November 1953 in Barnstaple. Her father, William Letts, was a steward in the Royal Navy who battered and bullied his wife and treated their 7 children with appalling severity. He was later diagnosed as being schizophrenic. As the third youngest of his children, Rose escaped the worst of her father's attentions. However, when the family moved to Bishop's Cleeve, her mother walked out, taking Rose and her 2 younger brothers with her. Later in the same year, Rose met the 27-year-old Fred at a bus stop and they soon began going steady. Fred had probably already committed 1 murder, maybe 2 by this time. I think it was 2. While the 15-year-old Rose was making a little pocket money from prostitution. Rose's parents disapproved of the relationship and put Rose into care, but when Rose attained her independence at the age of 16, she moved in with Fred and his 2 daughters at the local caravan site. In 1970, they had a daughter of their own called Heather. Thereafter, the Wests moved to a 2-storey pebble dash house in Midland Road, Gloucester, along with Fred's daughter Anne-Marie. Charmaine had been put into care in 1969, but was later returned to Fred, going missing shortly afterwards. The Wests apparently abused her viciously on the grounds that she was not one of theirs. And at Rosemary's trial, witnesses told of seeing Charmaine standing on a chair, her hands tied behind her back, while Rosemary beat her with a wooden spoon. Yeah, if you don't like this sort of, I advise you turn off now. The police believed that Fred had killed Charmaine around this time, and that when Rena had come looking for her daughter, he had killed her. He had killed her too. Neither was reported missing, and when Rose was asked where Charmaine was, she replied, "She'd gone off with her mother." West certainly did not expect any problems to be caused by his first wife when he married Rose on 29th of January 1972 at Gloucester Registry Office, for on the marriage certificate he entered his marital status as bachelor. 3 days later, the Wests moved into 25 Cromwell Street. Here they would create their own fantasy world, a world in which Rose not only gave free rein to Fred's desire for sadistic sex, but actively indulged in it herself. The house in Cromwell Street was also home to a family of 9 children, at least 2 of which were fathered by another man. West was furthermore said to have fathered as many as 24 children by different women. Because his wages were not enough to support such a large family, the Wests supplemented their income by taking in lodgers and by Rose's prostitution under the working name of Mandy Mouse. Neighbours remembered Fred West as being a devoted father who loved taking his children to the seaside and worked hard for a number of local employers. Using his DIY skills, he turned 25 Cromwell Street into a temple in Formica. The downstairs front room was turned into a bedroom for Rose. Set into the floor was a trapdoor which led down to the cellar, which West converted into 2 rooms in which 4 of the children slept. There was another bedroom with a lace canopied bed on the first floor, as well as a sitting room containing a fully stocked bar, TV and video. This story, however, was out of bounds to the children. Sorry about that, I just banged my head, I don't know if you heard that. On the top floor, it was one more bedroom which was kept locked. It contained a 4-poster bed that was fitted with spotlights and a concealed microphone. Whips, chains, manacles, and bondage gear were also to hand. It was here that they shot homemade, hardcore pornographic films starring the Wests and the punters who paid for Rose's services as a prostitute. The couple lived for sex and were both constantly on the lookout for young women who they thought they could use as sexual playthings. Rose played a key role in this. Fred later explained that it was a lot easier to pick up girls when he had Rose in the car with him because their victims felt more secure with a woman being present. After the young women had been lured to Cromwell Street, their faces were bound with sticky brown parcel tape and plastic breathing tubes were stuffed into their nostrils. Then their limbs were tightly bound and they were repeatedly raped and tortured. After they had died, their bodies were mutilated. Some say cannibalized, and their remains were then tossed unceremoniously into pits that had been dug under the cellar or back garden. No one thought it was odd that Fred did a lot of do-it-yourself work around the house. After all, he was a builder. By the 8th of April 1994, police had identified every one of the 9 bodies that had been found at 25 Cromwell Street. They were all those of young women aged between 15 and 21. 4 had last been seen waiting for buses. Linda Goff, a seamstress who worked at the Co-op in Gloucester, had disappeared in April 1973, just 2 weeks shy of her 20th birthday when she had left her parents' home to move into a flat in Gloucester. Her distraught parents had made enormous efforts to find her. The Swiss-born Therese Seigenthaler, I'm probably butchering that, a 21-year-old sociology student at Woolwich College in South London, had left her Lewisham home for the Holyhead Ferry on 15th of April 1974 to hitchhike to Ireland. She had boasted that because she was a judo expert that she could take care of herself. The third body found in the garden was that of the 17-year-old Alison Chambers, who had been placed with a firm of solicitors in Gloucester under the youth training scheme. Alison had run away from her home in South Wales and had written to her mother saying that she was staying with a big family. The police team then moved to Letterbox Field on Stonehouse Farm at Kempley. After a trench 135 feet, which I think is 41 metres, had been dug and 160 tons of soil were removed, the remains of West's first wife, Rena, were found. She had gone missing at the age of 24 and her remains were identified on the 14th of April 1994, which would have been her 50th birthday. A quarter of a mile away at Finger Post Field in Stonehouse Coppice, police found the remains of Anna McFall, a nanny who had been employed by Rena, who had vanished during the early 70s at the age of 22. The remains of Charmaine West, who had disappeared in 1971 at the age of 8, were found under the kitchen floor at 25 Midland Road. Up until this time, it had been assumed that Fred alone was responsible for the murders. On 21st of April 1994, however, Rose was jointly charged with a 67-year-old man with raping an 11-year-old girl and assaulting a 7-year-old boy, causing actual bodily harm, or ABH. Although the man was released on bail, Rose continued to be held. 2 days later, she was charged with having sexual intercourse with the same girl without her consent. After that, she was charged with the murders of Linda Goff, Carolyn Cooper, Lucy Partington, Therese Seigenthaler, Shirley Hubbard, Juanita Mott, Shirley Robinson, Alison Chambers, and finally, on 26th of May 1994, of her own daughter, Heather. Fred had already been accused of all 9 murders, as well as the murders of 2 people whose remains had not been identified yet. His younger brother, John Charles Edward West, was accused of raping 2 underage girls along with Rose. The most extraordinary thing about the West case was that they had got away with it for so long, for more than 2 decades. The West secret careers as sadistic sexual torturers and murderers of young women had flourished unchecked. West had killed his first victim, Anna McFall, from Sandhurst, Gloucestershire, before he had even met Rose. West had made Anna pregnant while she was working as a nanny for him and Rena in 1967, and had murdered her because she wanted him to leave Rena. The next two to die were Rena and little Charmaine. The police believed that West had killed his wife when she came looking for her daughter in 1971, and that Charmaine was strangled a few hours later. Victim number 4 was the 19-year-old Linda Goff, a local girl. She had become friendly with some of the West lodgers at Cromwell Street and had moved in herself in March 1973. She had found herself becoming unwillingly involved in the West's twisted sex games and was dead within a matter of weeks. Her body had been buried under the bathroom floor. Tape had been wound thickly around her head, and her dismembered limbs had been piled on top of one another. The fifth victim was 15-year-old Carol Ann Cooper, who lived in a children's home in Worcester and was last seen boarding a bus on the way to her grandmother's on the night of 10th of November 1973. Although West admitted killing her, he said that Rose had not been involved. Number 6 was the 21-year-old Lucy Partington. A devout religious student, she was studying medieval English at Exeter University when the West spotted her waiting at a bus stop in Cheltenham as they drove back from a Christmas visit to Rose's parents in Bishop's Cleeve on the night of 27th of December 1973. At Cromwell Street, she endured a week-long ordeal of rape and torture. West did such a sloppy job dismembering her body that he cut his hand and had to go to the hospital. Idiot. The next of the West known victims was Swiss-born Therese. The 21-year-old had been hitchhiking to Ireland for a holiday, and when West had picked her up in his lorry near Chepstow. She was then taken to Cromwell Street, where she was imprisoned, tortured and raped. When the police unearthed her remains at Cromwell Street, some of her body parts were found to be missing. Number 8 was the 15-year-old Shirley Hubbard, who was a schoolgirl from Droitwich who had disappeared on 14th of November 1974 while she was travelling by bus from Worcester to her parents' home. She too had been forced to wear one of West's mummy-style masks before being repeatedly raped. That mummy-style mask again was the tape around the head with 2 breathing tubes in the nose. The 18-year-old Juanita Mott was picked up as she hitchhiked into the Gloucester from her home in Newen on 11th of April 1975. Lured to their home by the West, she was then trussed up with 17 feet, 5 metres, of grey plastic clothesline and her own stockings. After the West had finished with her, Fred killed her with a blow from a hammer before decapitating her body and burying it in the cellar. Their 10th victim was Shirley Robinson, a bisexual. The 18-year-old had shared three in a bed threesome sex sessions. Yeah, 3 in a bed threesome, same shit. Sex sessions with the West during early 1978 before becoming pregnant with Fred's child and falling in love with him. Rose had also been pregnant in 1978 with a child of a West Indian man. Rose had become jealous of Shirley and had put pressure on her husband to get rid of her. He had complied. Shirley's body was found next to that of her unborn child in the garden of 25 Cromwell Street. A few months after Shirley had disappeared, the West had latched on to the 16-year-old Alison Chambers, who was living in a children's home in Gloucester at the time and was exactly the kind of vulnerable girl that they liked. One of her friends was a lodger at 25 Cromwell Street, and she had visited the house regularly. The West had asked her to become their nanny, and shortly after she had moved in, they had involved her in their sadistic sex play. The police found her body underneath the West's lawn. The last known victim was Heather West. Born in 1970, Heather was thought to have been the product of an incestuous relationship between Bill Letts and his daughter Rose. Fred had made her life a living hell. When she had refused to let him molest her, he had beaten her viciously. When she vanished on 17th of June 1987, the Wests told Fred that she had run away from home. The Wests were reunited in the dock of Gloucester's Magistrates' Court on June 30th, 1994. West brushed his wife's neck with his Rose and bent down to speak a few words to her, but Rose ignored him and refused to even glance at him. As they rose to leave the court, after the brief hearing, West tried to touch his wife again, only to receive the same response. They appeared together again for one last time in December 1994, when Rose West again pointedly ignored Fred. On New Year's Day 1995, Fred West was found hanging in his cell in Winson Green Prison. He had made a rope by plaiting strips of sheet together, standing on a chair. He had then tied his homemade rope to a ventilator shaft, put the noose round his neck and kicked away the chair. Things had not gone to plan, however, for the fall had not broken his neck and he was slowly strangled to death. His suicide left Rose to face 10 murder charges alone, along with 2 counts of rape and 2 of indecent assault. Coward. Sorry, Fred, but I'm not sorry for you. You're a scumbag and you're a coward. Her trial, which was presided over by Mr. Justice Mantle. Funny that. You're on trial and you've been presided by Mr. Justice Mantle. Opened at Winchester Crown Court on Tuesday, 3rd of October 1995. An early witness was Caroline Owens, who had been picked up by the West while she was hitchhiking in 1972. They had bound, beaten and raped her, she said, further alleging that Fred had threatened her that he would murder her. A witness described as Miss A also said that she had been abused by the West at 25 Cromwell Street, and Anne-Marie, Fred's daughter, described how she had been raped by Fred and Rose at the age of 8. West had told her that she should be grateful, and that all fathers did this to their daughters. She had become pregnant by her father at the age of 15, but he had arranged an abortion. In her defence, Rose claimed she was innocent. She said that her husband had manipulated her into participating in the assault of Caroline Owens, but stated that she did not know. Miss A. She furthermore denied all knowledge of the murders, as well as of the alleged assault on her stepdaughter, Anne-Marie. The defence played 4 of Fred West's taped interviews with the police, in which he had admitted to committing the murders and had said that Rose had played no part in them. The prosecution then called Janet Leach as a rebuttal witness. She had sat in on the police interviews with West and testified that when she and West were alone together after the interviews, had given a different version of his story, explaining that he had lied to the police in order to protect Rose, who had committed some of the murders. West had also told her that there were at least 20 more bodies that had not been discovered by the police. The jury found Rose West guilty of all 10 murders. In passing sentence, Mr. Justice Mantell said, "Rosemary Pauline West, on each of the 10 counts of murder of which you have been unanimously convicted by the jury, the sentence is one of life imprisonment. If the attention is paid to what I think, you will never be released. Take her down." He also ordered that the outstanding rape charges against her should be left on file. On 19th of March 1996, Rose had lost her appeal against her conviction. Meanwhile, the police continued their investigations into the deaths of 9 of the girls who had visited Cromwell Street and were never seen again. And that's where we're going to leave it, I'm afraid. If you've watched it this far, I really would appreciate it if you like the video. Apparently it helps me out. Yeah, sorry that it was a bit gruesome. It's one of the most well-known cases in England of serial homicides. Some say that Rose was even worse than Fred. And if you remember earlier when Rose had literally persuaded Fred to kill someone and Fred easily obliged, Fred's IQ was only said to be that of the low 80s. But I don't know what to say. It's just a gruesome case. Whoever can do that to children are absolute scumbags. In a way, they're lucky. Well, Fred killed himself, so Rose is lucky that the UK does not have the death penalty. Otherwise, well, yeah, she'd have died. She was actually attacked in prison by a woman who said, "I'm a mother and I cannot live with someone like Rose. I hate her." Understandably so. I could never even imagine what those poor kids felt and went through. One of the daughters jumped up, tried jumping off a bridge. Well, she did jump off a bridge, but she was found and rescued close to death. She said that people say I'm lucky I survived, but in reality I wish I had died, which is a horrible thing to say. I fully understand why she said it, but the fact that her parents made her feel that way, they literally put them poor kids through hell. Anyway, I'm rambling. If you like the video, please leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.